Get her out of my sight before she ruins this entire night. Nathaniel Cole's voice cracked across the ballroom so sharply that even the violinist stopped playing mid-note. Crystal glasses froze halfway to painted lips, camera flashes stalled, and more than 300 wealthy guests turned toward the black waitress standing motionless beside the champagne tower. Amara Brooks didn't defend herself. She didn't beg. She simply tightened her fingers around the silver serving tray, while red wine dripped slowly from the edge onto the marble floor like spilled blood beneath the chandelier light. The silence inside the Grand Crescent Hotel became unbearable. A famous senator lowered his fork. A woman in diamonds whispered something behind her glove. Somewhere near the back of the room, someone quietly muttered, "Poor girl." But Nathaniel Cole wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. His cold blue eyes stayed locked on Amara as if she had personally humiliated him in front of the entire city. "You spilled wine on a $7 million contract," he said flatly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Amara finally lifted her gaze. Her dark brown eyes were steady, calm in a way that somehow made Nathaniel angrier. "I didn't spill it on purpose, sir," she said softly. The gentleman beside you pushed his chair back suddenly. The investor sitting near Nathaniel stiffened but said nothing. Nathaniel didn't even glance at him. "Excuses don't belong in my hotel," he snapped. "Neither do careless employees." The words hit harder than the wine stain spreading across the white linen tablecloth. Amara's jaw tightened almost invisibly. She reached slowly for the gold name tag pinned to her uniform. The tiny click of the clasp echoed louder than the orchestra had moments earlier. Guests shifted awkwardly in their seats as she removed it and placed it carefully on the tray beside the broken wine glass. Nathaniel expected tears. Maybe anger. Maybe humiliation spilling across her face for everyone to witness. Instead, she straightened her posture and spoke so quietly he almost didn't hear her. "Funny thing about embarrassment, Mr. Cole," she said. "The people who cause it usually remember it longer than the people who receive it." A faint murmur rippled through the ballroom. Nathaniel's expression darkened. "Security." Two men in black suits immediately moved toward her. But Amara was already walking away. Her shoes clicked softly against the marble floor as every wealthy eye in the room followed her toward the grand staircase. Halfway there, she suddenly paused. For one strange second, she turned back toward Nathaniel with an expression that didn't look angry at all. It looked disappointed. Then she glanced toward the jazz quartet near the stage. The pianist had quietly resumed playing, a slow melody drifting through the ballroom like smoke. Amara stared at Nathaniel and said almost in a whisper, "You still don't recognize that song, do you?" Nathaniel froze. The words landed somewhere deep beneath his anger before he could stop them. The melody curled through the room again, soft piano keys floating under the chandeliers. Something unfamiliar twisted sharply in his chest. A memory. A hospital hallway. A woman humming beside dim fluorescent lights. Small fingers clutching a blanket. Nathaniel blinked hard, the image disappearing as quickly as it came. By the time he looked back toward the staircase, Amara Brooks was already gone. Nathaniel stood perfectly still long after the ballroom doors closed behind Amara Brooks. The piano melody continued drifting through the gala, soft and elegant, but now every note scraped against his nerves like broken glass. Around him, conversations slowly resumed in forced whispers. Silverware clinked again. Someone laughed too loudly near the back of the room. Yet the entire atmosphere had changed. Nathaniel could feel it. The donors who usually competed for his attention now avoided his eyes. A woman seated near the stage lowered her champagne flute and murmured to her husband, "That girl handled that better than most executives I know." Nathaniel ignored her. He adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo sharply and turned toward the ruined contract lying across the table. Red wine had soaked through several pages, bleeding the ink into dark stains. Across from him, Martin Graves finally cleared his throat. "Nathaniel, perhaps we overreacted a little." Nathaniel looked up coldly. "We?" Martin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Earlier confidence had vanished from his face. "The waitress did say I pushed the chair back suddenly." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "And did you?" Martin hesitated 1 second too long. That was enough. A strange silence settled between the two men while the jazz band continued playing softly under the chandeliers. Nathaniel suddenly heard the melody again more clearly now. Slow piano. Gentle trumpet. Familiar. Painfully familiar. His fingers froze around the edge of the table. Somewhere deep in his memory, fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A little boy sat alone in a hospital corridor swinging his legs above a tile floor too tall to reach. He remembered fear. The smell of antiseptic. And a woman humming this exact song nearby while smoothing a blanket over his shoulders. Nathaniel blinked hard and the memory vanished instantly. "Sir?" his assistant Claire asked carefully beside him. "Should I call another waitress?" Nathaniel exhaled sharply and straightened his posture. "No. Continue the dinner." Claire nodded but did not move immediately. "Amara was one of our best employees," she said quietly. Nathaniel looked at her with irritation. "Then she should have acted like it tonight." Claire lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." But disappointment lingered in her voice long after she walked away. Nearly an hour later, the gala ended beneath fake smiles and forced handshakes. Nathaniel barely remembered the conversations he had. Investors spoke to him. Politicians praised him. Cameras flashed as he posed beside a 20-foot crystal sculpture in the hotel lobby. Yet all he could hear was that sentence repeating inside his head. "You still do not recognize that song, do you?" Outside, Manhattan glowed beneath midnight lights as his black Rolls-Royce slid through traffic. Nathaniel loosened his tie and stared silently out the tinted window, while the city blurred past in reflections of gold and rain. Then the driver quietly switched on the radio. Soft jazz filled the car. Nathaniel's entire body stiffened. The same melody. The same slow piano. His breath caught before he could stop it. "Turn that off," he said immediately. But the driver glanced into the mirror. "Sir, this was your mother's favorite song." Nathaniel froze again. The city lights reflected across the glass beside him while something heavy pressed against his chest. His mother had been dead for 23 years. He almost never thought about her anymore. Yet tonight her memory felt suddenly alive, drifting through the darkness with the music. Nathaniel rubbed a hand across his face and looked down toward his cuff where a tiny stain of red wine remained. For some reason, instead of seeing the ruined contract, he saw Amara Brooks standing in silence while an entire ballroom watched her walk away alone. Nathaniel barely slept. At 3:17 in the morning, the lights of his penthouse were still glowing across Central Park, while untouched whiskey sat melting beside stacks of financial reports he could no longer focus on. The melody from the ballroom kept returning in fragments, haunting the silence between the ticking of the antique clock on his wall. He finally gave up trying to sleep and walked barefoot across the dark living room toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Somewhere 30 stories below, sirens echoed faintly through the city. Usually the sound comforted him. It reminded him that the world kept moving while he stayed in control above it. Tonight it only made the apartment feel emptier. Nathaniel loosened his collar and glanced toward the dining counter where his assistant had left a leather folder before the gala. Employee reports. Performance summaries. Hotel staffing updates. He almost ignored it again. Almost. But something pulled him toward it. He opened the folder impatiently and flipped through page after page until one photograph stopped him cold. Amara Brooks. 29 years old. Hospitality staff. Employee rating. Exceptional. Nathaniel frowned slightly. He kept reading. Double shifts. No sick days in 11 months. Volunteer work at St. Anne's Children's Hospital every Thursday night. Caregiver listed for younger brother Caleb Brooks. Nathaniel's eyes paused there. A small note beneath the file read, "Caleb Brooks, age 14, awaiting cardiac surgery approval." Nathaniel slowly lowered the folder. The silence inside the penthouse suddenly felt heavier. He looked again at Amara's employee photo. She was not smiling in it. Most staff force smiles for identification pictures, but not her. Her expression was calm, serious, dignified. The same expression she wore while the ballroom watched her walk away. Nathaniel exhaled slowly and turned another page. A silver bracelet appeared in one of the attached candid photographs from a hotel charity event. His chest tightened instantly. The bracelet. He had noticed it beneath the chandelier lights earlier, but now under the soft office lighting in the photograph, he could see the engraving clearly. A tiny crescent moon etched into silver. Nathaniel's fingers froze against the paper. He knew that symbol. Somewhere deep in his memory, buried beneath decades of meetings, money, and polished routines, he knew it. Suddenly another image flashed across his mind. A woman sitting beside a hospital bed humming softly, while twisting that same crescent bracelet around her wrist. Nathaniel stepped backward so abruptly the folder slipped from his hands onto the marble floor. His breathing slowed. No, that was impossible. He crouched immediately and picked the papers back up with trembling fingers. The bracelet stared back at him from the photograph like a ghost from another life. Nathaniel walked quickly toward a hallway lined with dark walnut shelves and unlocked a small cabinet he had not opened in years. Inside were old photographs, legal papers, and personal items he rarely allowed himself to touch. At the very back sat a faded black box covered in dust. He opened it carefully. Inside rested a childhood photograph of himself sitting in a hospital bed at 6 years old beside his mother Eleanor Cole. And around Eleanor's wrist gleamed the exact same silver bracelet with the crescent moon engraving. Nathaniel stopped breathing for a moment. The room became painfully quiet. The city lights outside flickered against the glass while two photographs 23 years apart rested side by side in his hands. Then his phone vibrated suddenly across the counter, shattering the silence. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Nathaniel answered immediately. "What is it?" Claire hesitated before speaking. "Sir, Amara Brooks did not come to work this morning." Nathaniel looked down again at the bracelet in the photograph, while something unfamiliar settled into his chest. Fear. By 8:03 the next morning, Nathaniel Cole was standing inside the executive conference room of the Grand Crescent Hotel, while 12 department heads sat in complete silence around the polished walnut table. Usually Nathaniel controlled rooms like this effortlessly. Investors listened when he spoke. Politicians adjusted their schedules around him. But today his attention kept drifting back toward the photograph folded inside his jacket pocket. Claire stood beside the presentation screen clutching a tablet against her chest. "We contacted Amara Brooks 3 times, she said carefully. No response. Nathaniel stared out the glass wall overlooking Manhattan traffic below. Did she quit? Claire hesitated. No formal resignation. Martin Graves shifted uncomfortably in his chair near the end of the table. The wine stain from the gala had somehow followed him too. Nathaniel could see it in the nervous way the man adjusted his tie every few seconds. "Honestly," Martin muttered, "after last night, can you blame her?" The room became painfully still. Nathaniel slowly turned toward him. "You seem unusually concerned this morning." Martin forced a weak laugh. "I just think maybe things became public." Nathaniel walked toward the table without speaking. His shoes tapped sharply against the marble floor while sunlight cut across the room in pale silver lines. Every executive lowered their eyes as he passed. Nathaniel stopped directly behind Martin's chair. "Did you push the chair back?" he asked quietly. Martin blinked. "What?" "At the gala." Nathaniel's voice remained calm, almost too calm. "Did you cause the spill?" Martin swallowed hard. "It was an accident." Nathaniel stared at him for several long seconds. Somewhere beyond the glass walls, helicopters hummed faintly above the city skyline. Finally Nathaniel straightened again. Meeting dismissed. Chairs shifted immediately. Papers gathered. Executives escaped the room with visible relief until only Claire remained standing near the screen. Nathaniel removed the photograph from his jacket and placed it carefully on the table beside the childhood picture of his mother. Claire looked down at the matching silver bracelets and her expression changed instantly. "Oh my God," she whispered. Nathaniel rubbed a hand across his jaw. "You recognize it too?" Claire nodded slowly. "I saw her wear that bracelet every day." Nathaniel looked toward the skyline again. "My mother had the same one." The words sounded strange coming from him. Personal. Fragile. Claire lowered her voice carefully. "Sir, there is something else." Nathaniel turned. "What?" She hesitated. "Amara never told anyone this herself. I only know because Human Resources asked employees to volunteer for a fundraiser last year." Claire paused before continuing. "Her mother used to work at St. Matthew's Hospital downtown. Pediatric wing." Nathaniel's heartbeat slowed instantly. St. Matthew's. The same hospital from his childhood memories. He stared at Claire without blinking. What was her mother's name? Lillian Brooks. Nathaniel's stomach tightened sharply. The memory returned all at once this time. Not fragmented. Not distant. Clear. A warm voice humming softly beside his hospital bed after his surgery. Dark hands adjusting the blanket around his shoulders while his own mother cried quietly by the window. And around the nurse's wrist, the crescent moon bracelet catching the fluorescent light. Nathaniel suddenly gripped the edge of the table hard enough for his knuckles to pale. Claire stepped closer carefully. Sir. But Nathaniel barely heard her. 23 years. 23 years, and he had publicly humiliated the daughter of the woman who once comforted him as a terrified little boy. He closed his eyes briefly. Then another realization struck him harder. Amara recognized the song because her mother used to sing it too. Nathaniel opened his eyes immediately. Get me her address. Claire looked uncertain. Sir, employee privacy policies. Claire. His voice cracked for the first time. Not with anger. With desperation. Please. Claire stared at him in stunned silence because Nathaniel Cole had never said that word inside this building before. The address Claire handed him was on the far edge of Brooklyn, nearly 40 minutes from the polished towers and private elevators Nathaniel Cole normally moved through every day. By 9:30 that night, his black Rolls-Royce slowed beside a narrow apartment building squeezed between a laundromat and a boarded grocery store with faded lottery signs peeling off the windows. Nathaniel stared silently through the tinted glass. The sidewalk outside glistened from recent rain. A child rode a bicycle through puddles while an exhausted woman dragged grocery bags up cracked cement steps beneath a flickering hallway light. Nathaniel had funded luxury developments worth hundreds of millions of dollars across New York City, yet somehow this part of it felt completely invisible to him. Sir? The driver asked quietly. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. His eyes had settled on a second-floor window glowing faintly yellow above the street. A silhouette moved behind the curtain, then disappeared. Something tightened in his chest again. He stepped out of the car before the driver could open the door for him. Cold air rushed against his face carrying the smell of rain, car exhaust, and food from a nearby street cart. Nathaniel adjusted his coat automatically, but the expensive fabric suddenly felt ridiculous here. A group of teenagers glanced at him briefly before continuing down the block. Nobody recognized him. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Cole looked like just another man standing alone on a city sidewalk. He entered the building slowly. The hallway lights buzzed overhead while old pipes rattled behind the walls. Halfway up the stairs, he heard soft music drifting through one of the apartments. Piano. Jazz. The same melody. Nathaniel stopped instantly. His heartbeat stumbled. The sound was quieter this time, slower, almost fragile beneath the hum of the old building. He followed it down the hallway until he reached apartment 2B. The music stopped. Silence settled on the other side of the door. Nathaniel stared at the faded brass numbers for several seconds before finally knocking. No answer. He knocked again, softer this time. Footsteps approached slowly from inside. Then the door opened barely 3 inches. Amara Brooks stood there wearing a gray sweatshirt and loose sweatpants, her dark curls tied back carelessly above tired eyes. For 1 second neither of them spoke. Nathaniel suddenly noticed she looked younger outside the hotel uniform. More human. More exhausted. Behind her, he could see stacks of medical bills spread across a tiny kitchen table beside prescription bottles and textbooks. A teenage boy slept curled on an old couch beneath a blanket while a portable oxygen machine hummed quietly nearby. Amara's expression hardened immediately when she recognized him. "You have got to be kidding me," she said softly. Nathaniel opened his mouth but no words came out. He had prepared speeches during the entire drive. Explanations. Apologies. None survived the look in her eyes now. "Miss Brooks," he began carefully. "I only came to talk." "At my home?" she asked. "After humiliating me in front of half of Manhattan?" Nathaniel lowered his gaze briefly. "I know I was wrong." Amara let out a short laugh without humor. "You know what is interesting about rich people, Mr. Cole?" Her voice stayed calm, but every word landed sharply. "You think apologies are brave because nobody ever tells you no." Nathaniel looked past her again toward the sleeping boy on the couch. Your brother. Amara shifted immediately, blocking the doorway slightly. Protective. You do not get to ask personal questions. The oxygen machine hummed softly in the silence between them. Nathaniel noticed then that her silver bracelet glimmered faintly beneath the apartment light exactly like it had in the old photograph of his mother. His throat tightened. Your mother worked at St. Matthew's Hospital, he said quietly. Amara froze. Amara's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the apartment door. The exhaustion in her face vanished beneath sudden caution. How do you know that? She asked quietly. Nathaniel glanced once more toward the silver bracelet resting against her wrist. Because my mother had the same one. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway light buzzed faintly overhead while distant sirens drifted somewhere beyond the apartment windows. Then Amara slowly opened the door another few inches, though her expression remained guarded. My mother's bracelet came from a nurse she worked with, she said carefully. She told me it represented protection. Nathaniel swallowed hard. My mother said the same thing. Amara looked at him differently then. Not softer. Not forgiving. Just confused. Behind her, the teenage boy on the couch stirred slightly beneath the blanket before settling again. Nathaniel lowered his voice instinctively. I remember your mother, he admitted. Or at least I think I do. Amara studied him for several seconds before stepping aside just enough for him to enter. 5 minutes, she said. That is all you get. Nathaniel walked slowly into the apartment. The place was small enough that he could see almost everything from the doorway. A tiny kitchen with mismatched cabinets. Medical paperwork stacked beside canned soup and pharmacy receipts. An old bookshelf crowded with nursing textbooks, children's novels, and framed photographs. One photograph caught Nathaniel's attention immediately. A younger Amara stood smiling beside a woman in pale blue scrubs with warm eyes and a familiar silver bracelet around her wrist. Lillian Brooks. Older now than in his memories, but unmistakably the same woman who once hummed beside his hospital bed. Nathaniel stared at the photograph quietly. She died 3 years ago, Amara said behind him. Her voice carried no self-pity, just fact. Nathaniel nodded slowly. I am sorry. Amara crossed her arms. Most people are sorry after the hard part is already over. The words landed gently but cut deeper than anger would have. Nathaniel looked around again. You take care of your brother alone? Since I was 24. She walked to the kitchen table and began gathering the scattered medical papers almost automatically, as though embarrassed he had seen them. Caleb's surgery keeps getting delayed because insurance only covers part of it. Nathaniel glanced toward the sleeping teenager. How old is he? 14. Nathaniel nodded faintly. 14. Old enough to understand fear. Old enough to pretend not to. He remembered being 14 after his mother died. The silence in his father's mansion had felt colder than winter. He likes jazz. Nathaniel asked quietly, glancing toward the old speaker beside the couch. Amara paused for the first time. That song calms him down before treatments. Nathaniel looked at her carefully. Your mother used to sing it at St. Matthew's. Amara's eyes lifted slowly toward his. You really do remember her. Nathaniel exhaled softly. I remember feeling terrified after surgery. His voice lowered further. And I remember a nurse who stayed after her shift ended because she thought no child should wake up alone. Amara looked down briefly, and for the first time some of the sharpness left her posture. That sounds like my mother. Nathaniel's gaze drifted toward the photograph again. She was kind to me when she had no reason to be. Amara let out a faint breath that almost sounded like a tired laugh. That was her problem. Nathaniel frowned slightly. What do you mean? Amara leaned against the counter beneath the dim kitchen light. She believed people could become better if someone showed them enough kindness first. Her eyes met his directly now. Calm. Steady. Personally, I think she gave too many people chances they never earned. The apartment fell quiet again except for the soft hum of Caleb's oxygen machine. Nathaniel looked at Amara Brooks standing beneath the yellow kitchen light with her mother's bracelet around her wrist, and for the first time in many years, Nathaniel Cole felt ashamed of the man he had become. Nathaniel did not leave immediately after that. Somehow the apartment itself held him there. Maybe it was the quiet hum of the oxygen machine beside Caleb's couch. Maybe it was the faded family photographs taped carefully along the refrigerator door. Or maybe it was the uncomfortable realization that this tiny apartment contained more honesty than most of the penthouses and boardrooms he had spent his life inside. Amara moved around the kitchen silently, stacking unpaid bills into neat piles while avoiding his eyes. Nathaniel noticed how automatic the motions were. She had done this alone for a long time. "How long have you worked at the hotel?" he asked softly. 3 years. "And before that?" "Nursing school." Nathaniel looked up. Amara gave a faint shrug. "I dropped out after my mother got sick." She opened the refrigerator and stared inside for a second too long before closing it again. Nathaniel noticed immediately. Almost empty. Just bottled water, medicine, and half a carton of eggs. Something inside him twisted painfully. "You should have told human resources about your brother's condition," he said carefully. Amara laughed under her breath. "So they could send me a sympathy fruit basket before denying my overtime request?" Nathaniel had no answer for that. Across the room, Caleb stirred awake slowly beneath the blanket. His face looked pale beneath the dim apartment light, but his eyes brightened slightly when he saw his sister. "Amara," he mumbled sleepily. Then he noticed Nathaniel standing near the kitchen table. Confusion crossed his face instantly. "Wait." Caleb pushed himself upright carefully. "You are him." Nathaniel straightened awkwardly. Caleb stared at him with wide eyes. "Nathaniel Cole. The hotel guy." Amara sighed quietly. "Go back to sleep, Caleb." But the teenager kept looking between them. "The internet already has clips from the gala everywhere." Nathaniel felt heat crawl into his face. Caleb frowned slightly. "People online are calling you a jerk." Amara closed her eyes briefly as if embarrassed for her brother. But Nathaniel surprised himself by letting out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. "They are probably right." Caleb blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. Then a coughing fit interrupted him suddenly. Amara moved instantly to his side, kneeling beside the couch with practiced calm. "Easy," she whispered gently. "Slow breaths." Nathaniel stood frozen near the table while she adjusted the oxygen tube and handed Caleb water with careful, steady hands. The entire moment lasted less than a minute, but it changed something inside him. There was no panic in her movements. No self-pity. Just exhaustion mixed with love. Caleb finally leaned back against the couch cushions, breathing easier again. "Sorry," he muttered weakly. Amara brushed a hand gently across his shoulder. "Nothing to apologize for." Nathaniel looked away toward the apartment window because suddenly the scene felt too personal to witness. Outside, rain slid slowly down the glass while traffic lights flickered red across the wet Brooklyn street below. "His surgery is scheduled for next month," Amara said quietly behind him. "Assuming the hospital does not delay it again." Nathaniel turned back toward her. "And if they do?" Amara crossed her arms tightly. "Then I keep working until someone finally decides my brother deserves to stay alive." The words were calm, matter of fact. Somehow that made them hit even harder. Nathaniel glanced again around the apartment. The worn couch, the cracked ceiling paint, the unpaid medical bills stacked beside textbooks she never got to finish. And all at once he realized something unbearable. Last night, while he stood beneath crystal chandeliers humiliating her over spilled wine, Amara Brooks had been carrying an entire collapsing world on her shoulders without letting anyone see it. Nathaniel lowered his eyes slowly. "I owe you an apology." Amara looked at him steadily across the tiny apartment. "No, Mr. Cole," she said softly. "You owe people humanity before they have to earn it." Nathaniel left the apartment close to midnight, but the city outside no longer looked the same to him. The streets felt louder. The cold felt sharper. Even the glow from storefront windows seemed different somehow, as if the world had been quietly existing beneath his attention for years while he walked past it without seeing anything at all. His driver stepped forward immediately when he reached the curb. "Back to the penthouse, sir?" Nathaniel looked once toward the second-floor apartment window where a faint kitchen light still glowed behind worn curtains. "No," he said quietly. "Take me to St. Matthew's Hospital." The driver blinked in surprise but nodded. Manhattan traffic had thinned by the time the Rolls-Royce pulled beneath the hospital entrance canopy nearly 40 minutes later. St. Matthew's looked smaller than Nathaniel remembered. Older. The brick walls carried decades of weather stains beneath fluorescent emergency lights that buzzed softly in the cold air. Nathaniel stepped inside slowly. The smell hit him first. Antiseptic. Coffee. Old linoleum floors. Instantly the memories returned stronger than before. A frightened little boy recovering from surgery. His mother crying quietly beside a vending machine. And somewhere nearby, a warm voice humming jazz through the darkness. Nathaniel approached the overnight reception desk where an elderly volunteer sat reading beneath dim light. "Can I help you?" she asked kindly. Nathaniel hesitated. Strange. He negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, yet suddenly simple words felt difficult. "I am looking for information about a nurse who used to work here," he said quietly. "Lillian Brooks." The volunteer's expression softened immediately. "Lillian." She smiled faintly. "Oh, honey." Everybody loved Lillian. Nathaniel's throat tightened. "You knew her?" "Of course." The woman removed her glasses slowly. She worked pediatrics for almost 20 years before she got sick. Nathaniel glanced around the quiet hospital lobby. What was she like? The volunteer laughed softly under her breath. Too kind for her own good. Nathaniel heard Amara's voice echo in his memory instantly. She gave too many people chances they never earned. The volunteer continued smiling sadly. That woman stayed late for children nobody else had time for. Sometimes she would sit beside scared kids and sing to calm them down. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. Jazz. Every single time. The woman tilted her head carefully. "You knew her family?" Nathaniel took a slow breath. "I think she once helped save mine." The volunteer studied his face more closely then. Recognition flickered suddenly in her expression. "Wait." She leaned forward slightly. "You are Eleanor Cole's son." Nathaniel froze completely. The woman pointed gently toward him. "The little boy with the heart surgery." Nathaniel stared at her in shock. "You remember that?" "Lillian never stopped talking about you." Nathaniel's chest tightened painfully. "Why?" The woman smiled faintly. "Because you were terrified and trying very hard not to cry." Nathaniel looked away immediately toward the dark hallway beyond the lobby. He suddenly remembered the night after surgery when he woke shaking from pain and panic. He remembered his mother exhausted and overwhelmed. And he remembered a nurse sitting beside him through the night humming softly while rubbing circles against his small hand until he finally fell asleep again. Nathaniel swallowed hard. "My family never thanked her properly." The volunteer's smile faded gently. "Honey, your family paid for the surgery wing renovation the next year." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "My father did that?" "Yes." She paused. "But Lillian always said kindness should not become a transaction." Nathaniel stood motionless in the quiet hospital lobby, while those words settled heavily into his chest. Kindness should not become a transaction. Outside, snow had begun falling softly across Manhattan. Nathaniel slowly removed his wallet and looked down at one of his black platinum cards before sliding it back into his pocket untouched. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel Cole understood that money could buy almost everything except the one thing he suddenly wanted most. The chance to become someone worthy of the kindness he had been given. The next morning, snow still clung to the edges of Brooklyn sidewalks when a black Rolls-Royce stopped quietly outside Amara Brooks's apartment building for the second time in less than 24 hours. But this time Nathaniel Cole arrived alone. No driver. No assistant. No security detail waiting beside polished doors. Just one man standing beneath the pale gray winter sky holding a small paper bag from the corner bakery downstairs. His expensive coat carried flakes of melting snow across the shoulders as he climbed the narrow apartment stairs slowly, almost nervously. Apartment 2B remained silent after his first knock. Nathaniel waited, then knocked again. A minute passed before footsteps finally approached the door. Amara opened it carefully, still wearing hospital scrubs. Beneath a heavy sweater, exhaustion written beneath her eyes. She looked surprised to see him standing there alone holding coffee and pastries like an ordinary neighbor. "Mr. Cole." Nathaniel lifted the paper bag slightly. "The bakery owner downstairs said these are your brother's favorite." Amara stared at him for several long seconds without speaking. Then she glanced down at the coffee cups in his hands. You came back. Nathaniel nodded slowly. I needed to. She hesitated before stepping aside quietly. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and medicine. Caleb sat awake on the couch wrapped in blankets, watching an old basketball game with low volume. His eyes widened immediately when he saw Nathaniel again. You are seriously back, he muttered in disbelief. Nathaniel offered a faint smile for the first time in days. Apparently. Caleb looked toward his sister carefully. I kind of like him better when he is not yelling at people. Amara gave her brother a warning look, but Nathaniel lowered his eyes with visible shame. You should have yelled back, Caleb added quietly. Nathaniel swallowed hard. He deserved that. Silence settled softly through the apartment. Outside, snow drifted slowly past the windows while traffic hissed through wet Brooklyn streets below. Nathaniel placed the coffee carefully on the kitchen table beside the stack of unpaid medical bills. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed an envelope. Amara's expression tightened instantly. No, Nathaniel looked up immediately. Please just hear me out. If that is money, take it back. Her voice stayed calm but firm. I am not accepting guilt payments. Nathaniel slowly shook his head. It is not money. Amara frowned slightly. Nathaniel handed her the envelope carefully. Inside rested a single folded document and an old faded photograph. Amara opened the picture first. Her breath caught instantly. The photograph showed her mother standing beside Eleanor Cole in the pediatric wing at St. Matthew's Hospital nearly 25 years earlier. Both women were smiling while a frightened little boy sat between them clutching a stuffed bear beneath a hospital blanket. Nathaniel, Amara, stared silently at the image. I found it in my mother's things last night, Nathaniel said quietly. Your mother stayed with me after surgery because I was too scared to sleep. Amara's fingers trembled slightly against the old photograph. Nathaniel continued softly. I spent most of my life becoming successful enough that nobody could ever see me weak again. His eyes lowered briefly. Somewhere along the way, I also became cruel. The apartment remained completely silent except for the ticking kitchen clock. Nathaniel looked directly at Amara now. No pride left. No polished billionaire confidence. Just honesty. I came here because your mother showed kindness to a terrified child once. His voice cracked softly beneath the weight of the words. And yesterday I humiliated her daughter in front of an entire ballroom. Amara looked at him carefully across the tiny kitchen. Nathaniel took one slow breath before speaking again. I am not asking you to forgive me for making a mistake. His eyes glistened faintly beneath the apartment light. I am asking forgiveness for becoming the kind of man capable of making it. Caleb lowered the television volume completely. Snow drifted quietly outside while the warmth of the apartment wrapped around the silence between them. Finally, Amara looked down at the second paper inside the envelope. It was not a check. It was Caleb's surgery approval confirmation signed personally by Nathaniel Cole Foundation Medical Outreach. Fully covered. Anonymous donor requested. Amara's eyes lifted slowly toward him. Nathaniel gave the faintest shake of his head. Your mother believed kindness should not become a transaction, he said quietly. So this is not payment. He glanced once toward Caleb sleeping beneath the blankets and then back toward Amara. It is simply what should have happened in the first place. For the first time since the ballroom gala, something in Amara's guarded expression softened. Not completely, not all at once. But enough. She stepped aside slightly from the kitchen table and looked toward the coffee cups growing cold between them. You can stay for breakfast, she said softly. Nathaniel stood motionless for 1 second as if the words themselves hurt. Then he nodded quietly and sat down at the small kitchen table, while snow continued falling gently beyond the apartment window, and somewhere in the background, soft jazz began playing once more.